I guarantee today's topic is something you have or will wrestle with at some point after graduation. How in the world do I find the right community, especially my faith community? There are no easy answers to this question, alumni, but we're going to help you do that today because it is vital that you move from isolation into connection. And we're joined by clinical counselor and spiritual director Nader Sayuni, who's going to help us make that happen. Welcome to After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. I'm your host and guide, John Steele, and this one's for you, alumni. Nader, one more time, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, really glad to have you. Nader, for people who have not jumped into our previous two conversations, I'll say for a more in-depth introduction, go back and listen to that very first one about discernment and rule of life. This is an interesting conversation to me because, you know, we are in a series that's about faith transition and faith development after graduation. And I hear alumni, almost every alum that I talk to, relationship is one of the challenging parts of transition. But I don't think it's always framed in terms of faith development. So I'm really interested for us to kind of lean into bringing those two pieces together as this being a part of an important part of our faith development after graduation, and when the role that community and relationships play in that. So I'm excited for you to bring what you've experienced into the conversation here. Nader, to kick us off, I think we all know that we need community. That feels like something that we hear about. But can you help us as we're starting things off, just get an understanding why? What is it that you've learned, that you've seen, research that you've done? What is it that makes it clear that community is such a necessity for us?
We have to know that relationships are a part of God's design in our lives. One thing I like to tell people is that, your stomach is for you, your body. It's not interested in anything that's happening in any other person's body. Your kidneys are for you. Your liver are for you. Your brain is not just for you. Your brain is shaped by other people's brains, and your brain will shape other people's brains. So the brain is made to interact with other brains. It is a network computer. It is not meant to be a standalone that, in the old days, I know none of our alumni will remember this, but I remember this back in the days before computers were connected to networks. You used to have to take a little disk and, put it in. That is not how our brains are. Our brains are more like today's computers. They're designed to be part of a network.
Wow.
And so it's really important. And we see that in the research. All the research points in the same direction.
Okay.
All the research on longevity says that the highest quality of life comes with good community. It says that the lower incidence of various types of diseases come with better community and better relationships. The longest longitudinal study that's been around is from Harvard, started in the late 30s, I think. And they were following these group of men from different socioeconomic strata. And they would ask these people questions every year. Some went up the ladder, some went down the ladder. Some did well, some did not do well. But the one variable that is correlated with life satisfaction is, quality of relationships.
Wow.
It is just amazing how important it is to our physical bodies, to our brains, to our spirit. It is just an absolutely critical thing that we cannot ignore, that we were designed to have as part of our lives, an important part. Another thing that people don't sometimes recognize is that all mental health issues are made worse by isolation.
Wow.
No matter what it is.
Yeah.
I challenge people to find me one mental health issue that is not made worse by isolation. If there's a tendency toward depression and you get isolated, you're going to get more depressed. If there's a tendency to anxiety and you get isolated, you're going to be more anxious. If there's a tendency towards, addiction or eating disorder and you're isolated, it's going to be worse. You name it, in isolation, it's probably going to get worse.
Yeah.
And so
that's really interesting because it's been a few years since I was in school, but I remember all of the research that we would go through, whether it was something that was about, disease prevention or, leaning away from unhealth, or specifically like positive psychology, leaning into health. So whatever aspect you were looking into, sort of the most common things that helped with that were getting enough sleep, exercising, eating healthy foods, and spending time with other people. Like there are some of those common threads that were so powerful for disease prevention and for feeling healthier, living a healthier life, just leaning into wellness, which is a conversation that we've just recently come out of on the podcast, as wellness in general, and that relationships are such a huge part of that. And when we're on campus, we are surrounded by our peers. We are surrounded by people who are experiencing so many of the same things that we are experiencing. And that doesn't necessarily mean that making friends is easy when you're a college student. It still requires work. It still requires leaning in, but it's easier than most of our experiences after graduation. So Nader, can you help shed some light on those realities? If you know anything about like why it's just harder after graduation, please like share some of that. Yeah. Share some of that information with us so that we can be prepared. But then also, if you have some tools that can help us, again, work our way through the relational transition and the spiritual elements that come along with that, like share those things with us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share what I know. I wish I knew more.
What you know.
Well, from some of the research around friendships, it seems that regular proximity is one of the key variables.
Okay.
So being around the same people on a regular basis creates kind of the fertile ground for friendships to develop. So the college years are a perfect time for that.
Yeah.
Not only do we have that proximity, but there's also the flexibility of time. There's also commonality of purpose and experience. So you have a number of things, a number of variables that come together to make the college years just a really optimal time for friendships. And, it's not just you in your 20s, you left college, you miss all your friends. You think, oh, it's just me. It's everybody. I mean, even in my counseling practice, we had one staff meeting where we discussed the topic of friendships, and we talked about, everybody talked about the period when they, like their golden years of friendship. And for every single person, it was their undergraduate years.
Yeah, right.
So, having said that, I don't want to make anybody feel like it's hopeless and they won't make friends. In fact, there is some very encouraging research that says that, yes, people in their 20s have more friends than people in their 40s and 50s and older, but they have the exact same number of close friends.
Interesting.
So it seems like what happens as we grow older is that we shed some of the more superficial friendships and relationships, and we invest more, and we have higher quality friendships in a smaller circle that does not go away, or hopefully does not go away.
Yeah.
For folks.
Yeah, that's really encouraging, the thought that, okay, so if I think about how many people, even in my college days, like how many relationships did I feel like these were my absolute go-to, like ride or die friendships? And that's a very small number of people compared to the broader number of connections and people that you might broadly label as your friends on campus. And to say, okay, it's actually going to be very similar to that after graduation, but I'm not going to have all of these sort of peripheral friends to go along with it necessarily. That might be different for different people, but that for the most part, it's actually like a really similar number of really close friends, and that those can still be deep, meaningful, really soul-feeding relationships.
Exactly.
What are some of the recommendations that you have for sort of taking next steps in friendship development and building a community around you?
Well, one of the things that I think is really critical is to ask the Lord to guide you into which church community He wants you to be a part of.
Yeah.
I am not a fan of consumer Christianity. I go to this church because it has better community, or I go to that church because it has better teaching, etc. I firmly believe that God cares about where we go to church, and that he has some ideas of where it would be best for me at this given season where I'm living right now. And so seeking God when you move to a new city and saying, Lord, where would you want me to be? And my guess would be that the Lord would want you to have good community. And if it's not going to be at church, then Lord, where? And that he would lead you to that. One mistake that people make with church community is that they expect that if they join a small group, if they join a Bible study, if they join a home group of some sort, a life group, that is going to be their community. And that is not entirely wrong, but it's not entirely correct either.
Okay.
Because it's not possible for that one group of people in a structured environment to meet all of your relational needs.
Yeah. Wow.
However, it can be a great starting point for relationships. It can function exactly like your college years, where you're around the same people, with commonality of purpose and a sense of shared vision, shared interest, etc. Then you can start to gravitate towards people, and then you can do things with them outside of the group. And it's really important to shift that paradigm. Because if I go to a group expecting that that's going to take care of everything, I'm going to be disappointed. Because you know what? They don't plan stuff every weekend. They cut the sharing short, or there's not enough time for sharing, or whatever. There are so many ways to be disappointed with it if that's where we're looking for all of our friendship.
Yeah.
One thing that this kind of leads me into is one of the more difficult things. So some of the research shows that, it's actually not that hard to meet new people.
Okay.
When you're lonely and you tell somebody, their first advice is, oh, you got to meet new people. Go join a gym class. Go join something at your park district. Go do an art class. Go do a dance class. Go join a sports league or whatever. That is not the hardest part.
Okay.
Meeting new people is not the hardest part. The hardest part is, once I've been going to this group for a few weeks and I'm hanging around and I have a certain affinity for somebody and I'd like to hang out with them more, taking that next step to inviting them to coffee or inviting them to hang out or to watch a game or something, that next step, that's the hardest part.
Yeah. Wow.
That's where the most risk is.
Right. Yes, you might get shut down.
Exactly, right? And that is unfortunately a reality that we have to contend with. And that sense of initiative and that very real possibility of rejection is part of the equation. And it's where people get stuck. So one thing that we absolutely need to know is that taking initiative does not mean that I failed. Just because I wasn't invited proactively by somebody else and I have to take the initiative to make something happen, that is not only okay, it's par for the course and it's appreciated by other people.
Well, I was just going to say that this you're taking me back to many conversations that I had with my own mother when I was younger. And there were a bunch of times that I remember feeling left out by people at school, or even by people that I would call my friends. And I'm like, man, I wonder why I'm not hanging out with my friends this Friday night or Saturday or whatever it might be, why I didn't get invited to that party. And I remember my mom saying this not as like a slap down, but as an invitation. And it was something to the effect, she was probably quoting something very specifically. And so I'm going to misquote her and the thing that she was quoting, or the person. But I remember her saying something to the effect of the people that have friends are the people who act friendly. That there was this element of the people who initiate, the people who step out and put themselves out there. That they're the ones that you see engaging with people engaging back with them because they've, as you're saying, they've taken the initiative. Which also means that you're probably there are going to be times you get shut down. you're going to get more no's. But if you keep asking, you're also going to get more yeses. It's just math.
Exactly.
It's just simple statistics.
Exactly. And, it's an act of love. It's an act of service to other people as well. We don't know who's sitting around feeling lonely themselves.
Yeah.
And where we're going to be able to give the gift of our presence in a loving way.
Yes. So it feels like it puts you in a very vulnerable place, though.
It is. And actually, I love that word, vulnerability, if I may take us in that direction.
Please. Yeah, let's go.
So many of our listeners probably have heard of Brené Brown. She is a popular podcaster and had a TED Talk that went viral. That's how she became really famous. She is a PhD social worker from Texas. And the book that she wrote after that viral TED Talk was called Daring Greatly. And being the nerd that I am, when I picked up the book, the first thing I did was looked at the appendix because she had a description of her research.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I wanted to know, what's the empirical basis for what she's going to tell me.
Oh, I love that question.
And it turns out she took all her graduate students and sent them out to do interviews of 1,000 people.
Whoa.
That's a lot of interviews.
That's a lot of people.
And that's a lot of data to, go through in qualitative research. Quantitative research is easy. You're asking, multiple choice questions and you're getting answers. But qualitative research, you actually have to parse through sentences and look for themes. Exactly. Yeah. You're looking for the themes and identifying them and tabulating them. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So immediately she had my respect. 1,000 interviews, that's something I'm going to pay attention to.
Yeah.
She asked one very important question.
Okay.
What helps people feel connected?
And
the number one variable in how people feel connected is a sense of vulnerability.
Wow.
When I feel like somebody is being vulnerable with me, I am drawn to them. When I'm vulnerable myself, people are drawn to me. It's as if when I'm vulnerable, it gives other people permission to not be perfect.
Yeah.
And so they relax more. They want to share more. They are drawn more. Now, it's not without pitfalls. And I'm going to go through some of those.
Yeah. Yes.
Fair warning. Like you said, you could get hurt. You could get rejection.
Yeah.
Being vulnerable may scare some people. It may, they may not be able to go there with you, and then you have to kind of say, well, okay, I guess that's not really the friendship I wanted anyway, because I really want deeper connection. If somebody can't go there with me, well, next, so that's one possibility. Another thing to watch out for is there's also sometimes a tendency to overshare too quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
And so there's some research that says that if you're too vulnerable too quickly, people run away. And so there's kind of a spectrum of not diving into the deep end right away, but going into the shallow water and going deeper and deeper. One of the ways I suggest people doing that is kind of use a mental scale in your head. If you're not sure, and this doesn't feel natural to you, use a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being most vulnerable, 1 being hardly vulnerable. And you start maybe at a 2 or a 3. Share something that's a 2 or a 3.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I recommend. Another pitfall, and I get this a lot in therapy. Almost everybody that I'm encouraging, let's say I have somebody who's having trouble making deeper relationships, or somebody's complaining that they're surrounded by superficial connections, and I'm like challenging them to be a little more vulnerable and take that next step. Almost invariably, I get this complaint. I get this response. Yeah, but I don't want to be complaining. And that is a very key question. And that is important to look at that and make a clear distinction. And what I usually do is say something like this. I'll say, all right, let's do a mind exercise, a mental exercise together.
Yeah.
Let's think about person A and person B. Both are experiencing the same thing at work, but both are coming home and sharing differently with their spouses. Person A goes home and says, honey, I hate my job. My boss is a jerk. He yelled at me today, and I'm so mad. He did it in front of all my colleagues. That is just absurd, and I cannot wait to leave this place. And I just, I don't want to talk to anybody when I go back. Person B comes home and says, oh, honey, today really was a difficult day. I felt really humiliated by my boss. That made me feel really small. And I feel like a failure. And I have trouble having hope in my workplace. Which person do you want to be married to?
Probably person B. Probably person B.
Yeah. It's because
that feels like a place that I want to lean in and say like, oh man, that sounds really hard, versus the other side where it's like, sheesh.
Yeah.
So it's a little more of a grading, sort of a grading way of telling a story versus a way that makes that sort of opens up an emotional response, like a meaningful emotional response, a helpful one.
Exactly. And I love the word that you said, it draws you in. And that's what vulnerability does. It draws us in. And complaining does the opposite. It pushes us away. So we're right to be concerned, not to complain. Sure. But we need to know the difference between complaining and being vulnerable and sharing our feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that can be a real difference.
Yes.
So there are pitfalls. It is scary, but it is totally worth doing.
Right.
And one other thing that I think is really important with relationships that people struggle with in their 20s, and that's boundaries.
Okay. Yeah.
And as Christians, I find especially struggle with boundaries. We have this well-intentioned desire to love everybody fully and to be kind and caring. And then pretty soon, we're starting to dread going to church because that person that just can't stop talking and doesn't stop to listen. And it's just draining me of every ounce of energy. Every time I talk to them, they're just going to make a beeline for me after church, and I'm not going to talk to anybody, and, et cetera. So, how do we set a boundary with somebody like that? How do we, first of all, discern in ourselves, okay, God, I think I have grace to give this person 5 minutes every other week or 10 minutes every other week, or maybe I'll go the extra mile and spend, half an hour talking to them. Or maybe I'll say, hey, there's a few other people I want to talk to today. Could we set a time for a phone call? So we're setting a loving boundary. That is important. And to all the people who right now are saying what some directees say to me or some clients say to me, is like, no, that's not Christian. We have to be, caring and loving. I'm like, hold on a minute. Did Jesus set boundaries? And sometimes people are so resistant. I say, go check out Jesus's life and read through the gospel and make a list for me of all the times where Jesus set a boundary.
Yeah. Wow.
So boundaries are important because they help us stay loving for the long term. Whether it's in friendships or in ministry, we need to be able to be in this for the long term.
Well, it's just interesting. It's interesting to me, the sort of both sides of this that you've shared with us here. It feels like you're giving us a really helpful framework that makes it so that we don't lean too far back, and that we also don't lean too far in. That both of those things can take us in unhelpful, unhealthy directions. And that when we do lean in, that we can do it the right way. We can use the scale of 1 to 10 for, is this too vulnerable, not vulnerable enough? Let me just gauge this. And then also, what's the language that I'm choosing as I share the experiences that I'm having? And, is that being vulnerable, or am I actually leaning in the direction of complaining? But then also, so we know like where are the right places to lean in, but then also like, oh gosh, is there somebody that I have committed too far to leaning in, and it's actually taking too much from me, and so how can I, in a loving and kind way, how can I pull back so that I have the resources that I need to invest in the right places, to lean in the right places. And that feels really helpful to be able to have those structures in place for getting our posture right as we invest ourselves in relationship and as we take those risks.
Yeah. I mean, we're in this for the long run.
Yes.
This is no longer a semester at a time. This is no longer a quarter at a time, right? Right. Those people that you see in church, you might see for years. Those people at your workplace, you can be around for years.
Yes. Yes.
So it's important to be discerning. If you want to go back to our first podcast about in this series about, how do we discern,
right.
Be discerning and be loving in the boundaries that we set. Being loving and discerning requires us at times to be flexible with our boundaries. And it's important to recognize that as well.
And Nader, as always, you have provided us with so many great pieces here, but is there like a final word of advice or encouragement that you would give to our alumni in this first year of life after graduation as they think about relationship and incorporating this as a part of a spiritual as part of their spiritual rhythms, their faith rhythms? A relationship is a part of that. And then do you have any final resources that you would encourage us to look into?
Yeah, I would, as always, I usually start with prayer. Start by praying for a good community. Start by praying that God would lead you to relationships that are life-giving. Yeah. That's God's will for you.
That's a good prayer to pray.
That He wants this for you. You know that He will answer. So it's good to pray for friends and family and for those relationships.
Yeah.
If you still find yourself isolated, talk to your pastor, talk to your therapist. See, are there things you can do? For some people, there are social skills that need to be developed a little bit further. I know for me, I had to learn about vulnerability, in order to take my relationships deeper. And I'm so grateful that I got to learn that. So that's one thing I would say. Don't neglect that. Don't allow yourself to get isolated. Get help if you don't get a direct answer from God. He may be wanting you to get more concrete help. So ask Him where to go for help, and then take the next step and go get help.
Yeah.
And then for resources, there's a new book that I love. I absolutely love this book. It's not a Christian book, but it was on the New York Times bestseller list, I think. It's called Platonic. Okay. It is about friendships. It is thoroughly well-researched. Thoroughly well-researched. And some of the stuff I shared today is from that book. It's really an excellent, very well done book. So if you want to get up on the latest research on friendship, if you're a nerd like me, or not, because it's a very readable book. And I think she's, she's a psychologist. She's very, very good at what she researches, and she did a bang up job researching this and writing about it. I think one last thing, I'll say this. In one of my graduate seminary classes, we talked about friendships a lot, and the spiritual side of friendships. And there's a medieval monk, his name is Elred of Ripo, who wrote a treatise on friendship. And one of the things that he said is that friendship is the most privileged relationship.
Wow.
And it is the most privileged relationship because it is the only one that has no strings attached. You don't have to be my friend.
Yeah.
It is based on mutual joy. And so it's a very privileged relationship. And it's something that God has given us to enjoy. So my prayer for all of us is that would be a place of great joy.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, Nader, thank you so much. This has been phenomenal. I've really loved getting to spend these last 3 episodes with you, and to sort of to pick your brain about this part of the transition experience that our alumni have. One of the things that I really appreciate about what you've shared with us is I feel like you are inviting us to live an empirical life, a life of not just thinking and wondering. Like, that's good. Like, ponder, consider. Like, those are good things, but you are inviting us to step out and to try and to test and to analyze and to tweak and to try again. And that feel like that persistence, that try again, fall down, dust yourself off, like adjust your stance and go again. That in each one of these conversations that we've gotten to have, it feels like an invitation to test, to collect data, and to retest. And that just feels like something that we have to do in life after graduation in so many different places, not just this aspect of transition, but in each one of our each part of our life moving forward. And so this feels like a really helpful mindset in addition to very practical skills that you've given us. And so I'm super grateful for your investment in us over these last few episodes, and the great content you've given us to consider moving forward.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, John. One thing I forgot to mention, if I may, just extend our time just a minute or two. I forgot to mention that friendship can be a very powerful catalyst to spiritual growth, because Jesus comes to us through each other.
Wow.
And we can learn about him, and we can encounter him in each other. Yeah. And not to lose sight of that. So friendship can be a powerful way that we experience Jesus, and that we grow and deepen. It's a way that we can experience deeper relationships. One of the reasons college tends to be a place of tremendous spiritual growth, and why a ministry of something like InterVarsity is so important, is because it's happening at a highly relational time, because relationships, as I mentioned earlier, change our brains. Yeah. And so much of our spirituality we get through the cognitive part of our brain, the little 15% of the brain above the left eye. That's where you think all the brain is, because that's where the cognitive executive functions are. But that's not all your brain. There's so much more. And in those other places are the habits, are the responses, the things that are making my hand move like this or like that, are making me respond emotionally to a question that John asks, or something like that. Or even as John is now, shaking his head and laughing, that's subconscious. He did not say to himself, I will shake my head. And right. But these things are shaped at a subconscious level. And guess what? Our subconscious needs to be discipled also. Wow. And that's something I've been working on, is, some material on discipling the unconscious mind. And one of the chapters in that manuscript is discipling the unconscious mind through deep relationships, because deep relationships give us access. They change us without our knowing, and they change us into the likeness of Christ, because we rub up against each other in ways that we catch Christianity. I'm sure you've heard, Christianity is more caught than taught. Well, that's how, right? In relationships.
I'm not sure I've ever felt that the "you miss every shot you don't take" adage was logically sound, but here's one you can take to the bank. You'll never make a shot if you don't shoot the ball. Alumni, one of the most important things we can do as we develop our post-graduation community is to keep trying. Keep initiating, as Nader said. Yes, it means you're going to miss a lot of shots, but the more shots you take, the more you will make, too. Just keep trying. It's worth the effort and it's worth the pain, because as Nader mentioned at the start of the episode, developing a strong community is one of the best ways to boost your quality of life and your overall health and well-being, both physically and spiritually. Being with others is just good for us because it's what God intended for us from the beginning. Take the shot and keep on trying, alumni. Your community is out there. Nader, thank you so much for joining us for these 3 episodes. You have provided us with an absolute wealth of knowledge, wisdom, and practical steps to take as we navigate faith transitions after graduation. Alumni, come back next week for a very special guest, Dr. Heather Thompson-Day, who's going to help us navigate a really tough part of our faith transition after graduation: doubt. What do I do when I'm not so sure anymore? Come back next week for some really solid guidance. Until then, consider sharing this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and I will see you in the after, alumni. Thanks for listening to After 4. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Zentera, edited by Caleb Leppert, and our After 4 theme music was written and performed by John Steele.